I am currently sat in front of every book that I've read this year. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's a little humbling. It's making me realise that I should probably leave the house more. This year, I read more books than I have ever read in a year, and I'm about to tell you about every single one. I'm fully expecting this video to take a long time to film. So we have coffee and we have an emotional support axolotl. I literally don't even know where to start. I've separated everything into genre. I've decided to do them that way. I will have just posted, you should have already seen, my top 10 books of the year. If you haven't already watched that, go watch that, come back. But this is everything I read this year. I will give you the grand total at the end, but I think for now we're going to go through them genre by genre. I think that's the best way to do it. So then if there's a genre that you're not remotely interested in, you can skip over it. There'll be timestamps. We are going to start with my smallest category, which is DNFs. This year I DNF'd 2 books, and I'll be honest with you, they're soft DNFs. The first one is The Natural Way of Things by Charlotte Wood. I started this, it was so unbelievably dark and disturbing that it was not doing good things for me. So I was like, I'm going to put this down, I'm going to come back to it when I'm ready. When that time will be, we may never know. It's a dystopia about all these women trapped in a sort of dungeon. That's really as far as I got. I only got about 60 pages in. And the only other book that I DNF'd, if you can even call it that, was Emma Cline's short story collection. I don't like saying the title. I got probably halfway, I'm actually not sure. I didn't even intentionally DNF this one, I just ran out of time on my library hold and then had to return it. But I am a big Emma Cline fan, so I do very much intend to continue that one. Okay, second category, non-fiction. Again, only 2 books in this category. The first one is Everyone You Hate Is Going to Die and Other Comforting Thoughts by Daniel Sloss. Maybe one of my favourite titles ever. He is a comedian. This is his book about love, relationships, life. It's quite cynical, witty, fun. I would only read it if you actually know and like Daniel Sloss. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're already a fan of him, but I would recommend checking out his comedy. The only other non-fiction book I read this year was Creativity. This was also probably the shortest book that I read this year. The audiobook was, I think, exactly an hour. I listened to it on a dog walk. I finished it in 35 minutes because I had that speed up. It's basically all about creative thinking. I took a few things away from it, but it was a pretty simple, small book, but it was punchy and it was fun. All right, the next genre I have called Dystopia and then only put 1 series in it. I'm pretty sure I've read more dystopia books. So I guess we will call this the Gone genre. I read most of the Gone series, which is a YA dystopia. It's a reread for me. I've been rereading these all year in order to read the last one and have not got to the last one yet, but that is tip top of the TBR for next year. I love this series. It has a little bit of everything. Horror, romance, magic. It's a lot of fun. Okay, I think our next biggest genre is a little bit of a jump up now. We have fantasy. I feel like I have said so many times this year how I am not a fantasy reader. I have read 8 fantasy books this year. I read the first 2 Akdar books, A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. I was very nervous going into them because I was intimidated. I thought they were going to be so hard to understand. I actually think they're quite a good place to start with fantasy. I mean, I'm not an expert on this remotely, but for somebody who is very much a newbie to the genre, they were fun, they were fast-paced, they were relatively easy to understand. Then along the same veins, another TikTok classic, we have Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I actually just read this one very recently. I had kind of been putting this off because for some reason I had it in my head that I wasn't going to like it. I really liked it. It's romantasy but relatively light, at least in this one, on the romance. Very simple world building, it throws you right in and it moves so quickly. I just got the second one and I'm actually really excited to continue this. Then we have a book that was actually sent to me by the author. This is Quiet Thunder by JP Harker. This is one that you probably want to be a bit more integrated into the fantasy scene because I definitely struggled more to understand this one. This one was very war and politics based. There were lots of different groups fighting for lots of different things. I don't really remember the ins and outs. I remember it was very gory, very gruesome, lots of body parts were hacked off. That's mostly what stuck with me. I don't know if this one actually counts as fantasy, but if I did a Greek mythology section, we would have one book in it, and it would be Circe. The most beautiful writing. I will say I switched to the audiobook about maybe 50% in, and I got lost. I do think it was probably a me issue because I was following it up to that point, but I do wish I'd stuck with the physical version because I didn't really understand what was going on in the latter bit of this book. Another one that I don't actually know if this is fantasy, but again, I'm putting it in the fantasy section. We have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. One that took me by surprise. Another one that I was maybe avoiding a little bit. This made me cry. It's this super cozy, wholesome fantasy, which is really not my thing. It's kind of low stakes. It's about this guy who dies literally in the first chapter, and then it's about this group of people kind of helping him pass into the afterlife. Super lovable, really wholesome characters, and yeah, it made me cry at the end. It's actually a really sweet book. And then we had the absolute brick that was Iron Flame, the sequel to Fourth Wing. I can't even believe I read this year. This feels like a lifetime ago. This was definitely a lot slower paced than Fourth Wing was. It kind of had very similar vibes to the first one. A lot of the character arcs were very similar, but where this one ended definitely set up excitingly. I believe the third book is coming, I want to say soon. I want to say maybe in January or February next year. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes because this one definitely left off in a very exciting place. And then I read the sequel to Shatter Me, which was Unravel Me. I don't know why, the plot of this has kind of vanished from my brain. We're following Juliet. It's like a dystopia. If she touches people, they die. I think this one was kind of like a revolution vibe. I kind of really can't remember, which is quite bad. This is YA. On the romanticy scale, very much towards the romance side. It's almost a romance set in a fantasy world, in my humble opinion. That's fantasy done. Oh, we missed a category. Sorry, we're going back. Just pretend that I did this before fantasy. We have plays. I read 4 plays this year, which is awful. For anyone who might not know, I'm an actor. I trained in theatre. I should have read a lot more than 4 plays this year. Alas, I apparently have not, but I will speedrun them very quickly. We read Fleabag, which might be my favourite play of the year. It was phenomenal. It's tiny, but it has an incredible TV show. It's a one-woman play. I've seen a screening of it. The text is so witty, but deep, funny. It's great. Then we have Love from a Stranger by Agatha Christie. I do think the plot of this has also escaped my brain. It's something to do with a woman marrying a man who maybe turns out to not be that great. It's something along those lines. I don't totally remember. Then I read 1 Minute by Simon Stevens. I've read a lot of his plays. I really, really like him. This one was set in London and it was following, I want to say, the death of a young girl, and it was kind of the fallout, the aftermath of that. Simon Stevens does naturalistic dialogue like nobody else. And last but not least in that category, we have 448 Psychosis by Sarah Kane. Incredibly dark, incredibly sad. Check your trigger warnings if you want to read it, but a very unique play. And I mean, it's an absolute classic, so I'm very glad I read it, but it is not one to go into lightly. Okay, we're back on track. We're going with the next genre, which is romance. I read 11 romances this year. I honestly thought I'd read a lot more, but I will say I went into a romance slump for a good majority of this year. I don't really know what happened there. I just got into a place where I just really was not vibing with it, so I just stopped. And I think the break did me well because now I feel like I'm enjoying it again. But I'm definitely, as with fantasy, more of a romance dabbler. Anything that's very genre-based and tends to follow very similar plot points, like a lot of romance books sometimes can, I definitely have to pace them out. I cannot read just romance back to back to back. So let's start with the video where I read romance books back to back to back. So I read Magnolia Parks. I then later in the year read the sequel, which is Daisy Hates. I kind of almost am reluctant to put these in the romance category. I feel they are more drama. It's very like toxic characters doing the same things over and over again, hurting each other. So it's not necessarily romantic, but it is about relationships and romance and like rich, privileged people annoying each other. I think of the 2 characters, I'm a Daisy Hates girly. I'm pretty sure this is correct, that Magnolia Parks is now done, but Daisy Hates is still gonna get more books, which is interesting. So I guess we'll see where this goes. I own the next 2 in this series, but no more after that. Then I read Icebreaker, and again later in the year followed up with the sequel Wildfire. These two are honestly quite different to each other, both incredibly spicy, but other than that I do think they're very different. This one is hockey romance. This one is probably a little bit more wholesome. It's more summer camp, summer vibes, but less happens in this one. There's a little bit more plot going on in this one. This one is more all vibes. They get together quite early and they're just kind of hanging out. It's a good summer read if you just want something easy and fun. But they're good, they're silly, they're spicy as anything, so if that's not your thing, you won't like them. But if it is your thing, you will. And then in the same video, I read Reminders of Him. We're basically following Kenna, who has just got out of prison for, I can't remember if I can say, something that she has done. And she's trying to reconnect with her daughter. I'm pretty sure she had the daughter in prison. So the whole plot is her trying to find her daughter and then kind of get back into her daughter's life. And then there's also a very heavy romance subplot. Probably like 50-50 on the romance subplot. My camera cut off because apparently I've already been talking for that long, which is concerning. Next, I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I will say this suffered a little bit from my romance slump because I definitely read this during the big romance slump. So I really enjoyed how literary fiction this one was, and I think that's why I picked it up, because it was way less romance than the others and way more literary fiction with romance. The writing is beautiful, and because it's so emotionally deep, it makes you back the characters so much more. I do wish I'd saved it for a time when I was not in a full romance slump, but I would absolutely read from Tia Williams again. I think she is an incredible writer. Then I started a series that I honestly did not think I would like. I didn't think I was gonna like it, and you know what? I am just a girly and I loved it. That is the Flawless series by Elsie Silver. They are both very fun, very silly, spicy, small town. They were really, really cute. I think Heartless is my favourite, but I really enjoyed both. This book cart is filling up quickly and we've not even touched literary fiction. Then I read a romance that I've actually never heard of. I've never heard of this author or anyone talk of this book, and that is Stand Up Guy by Nina Kay. I read this at the Edinburgh Festival because I was working there, and this book is set at the Edinburgh Festival, so I was like, I kind of can't not. I do remember this was a little unusual in its writing style. The characters communicated to no end, so it did mean when problems arose, they were solved very quickly. So it wasn't necessarily a very like tension-filled romance, but I think if you like communication and like healthy relationships, you'll probably like this. Even though also the guy is actually quite rude throughout. So I don't know. I guess make of that what you will. Great atmosphere though. If you're ever going to Edinburgh, take this with you because it's such a great Edinburgh atmosphere. Then I read The No Show. If you've seen my reading vlog for this, I did not have the foggiest what was going on in this book. Still to this day don't know if you were meant to know. I got very confused. It's about 3 women going on a date or dates with a man or men. I still don't really know. I still don't really know if you're meant to know. I don't know if it was definitely romance. I think it was probably more contemporary fiction, particularly with the ending. And I will say the ending was great. I never saw that coming. But I do think it lent itself more to contemporary fiction. But I think Beth O'Leary, that is kind of her thing, because I've read The Flat Chef from her as well, which was definitely more on the romance end. But she always has a little bit of a twist on a romance book. And last but not least in this genre, we have my favourite Emily Henry book that I've read, which is Happy Place. I kind of knew going in that this was going to be my favourite just because I knew the themes were going to resonate. It talks very much about oh, I have coffee. What was I saying? It very much is a story about growing up, growing maybe apart from your friends, but trying to hold on to those friendships. It really centres a friendship group and trying to like show up for your friends in a really beautiful way. I'm actually getting goosebumps talking about it. This was definitely my favourite Emily Henry book, and I really liked the tension between the 2 main characters. Because it was second chance romance, there was almost, and I say almost because it is contemporary fiction, it's kind of an enemies to lovers going on. A tiny bit. I know it's not an enemies to lovers book, I do know that, but kind of. Hear me out. Because they've broken up and they're angry at each other, and then they're forced to be in a place together in this holiday house because they're forced to be together and they're not happy with each other. It kind of gave enemies to lovers. Don't come at me in the comments. Okay, that is romance done. We're about to move on to my second largest category of the year. I'm kind of surprised that this is my second biggest genre, but the numbers don't lie. We're moving on to thriller and mystery. Okay, we're going to start with one of my favourite authors. I'm not going to bang on for too long because I feel like I've done nothing but talk about her this year, but that is Lisa Jewell. I read The Night She Disappeared, None of This Is True, and The Family Remains. This one is the sequel to The Family Upstairs, which is a cult story. This one is 3 timelines about a young mum who goes missing and kind of the aftermath of that. And then probably my favourite book that Lisa Jewell has ever written, None of This Is True. Could not recommend the audiobook enough for this one. It's largely mixed media with a lot of podcast elements. I genuinely think the best way to consume this story is the audiobook, and I never say that about books. Then, I'm surprised I only read one book by this author this year, but we read Carrie by Stephen King. I was a little terrified going into this. It wasn't necessarily as scary as I was expecting. It was definitely uncomfortable. I won't explain the plot to you. I assume we all know. I'm glad I read it. I feel like it's a classic and it's just one of those books that I've always wanted to read, so I'm glad that I finally got to it. Next we have Then Things Went Dark by B. Fitzgerald. This is actually the ARC edition, but it is out now. This is Love Island meets murder mystery. The book is broken up into episodes of a reality show, and there was a murder that was done live on the show, streamed to everybody, and it's kind of the build up to that and then the aftermath of it. It was a lot of fun. Kind of a similar-ish vein, we have The Beach Party by Nikki Smith, another murder mystery set on an island. Kind of following this big group of kids on a holiday, they do some very awful things and then kind of the aftermath of them covering it up. It took me a really long time to figure out who was who in this book, but once I did that, it moved quick and it was fun. Then we have The Murders at Fleet House by Lucinda Riley, actually the only thriller book that she ever read, or I should say mystery. This one's definitely more of a mystery. It follows a murder at a boarding school and it's kind of the investigation of that. I don't remember too much about this, but I lent it to my mum and my mum really liked it. Then I read The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. This book took me so by surprise. The atmosphere in this book was incredible. It was following a couple of writers staying at a villa. I loved the writer's retreat element, but it's basically following a mystery of something that happened in the villa before these 2 women got there, like years and years before. It has 2 timelines, very nicely interwoven. I really, really liked this book. Then another one I read relatively recently, we have The Last Resort by Heidi Perks. I feel like thriller is the hardest genre to keep a track of all the plots. I don't know why. This basically follows a couple in couples counselling, and they are both giving different accounts of some things that happened, and so the therapist is trying to figure out whose story is true. I don't remember a whole lot more about it than that, but I think it was a relatively solid thriller. Or honestly, that one's probably more of a mystery as well. Next, we have Hidden Pictures, which I think is listed as a horror. It read as more of a thriller to me, but I get it. It's like a supernatural horror, thriller, whatever you want to call it. I loved this book. I absolutely flew through it. It has pictures which made it so bingeable. Following a woman who shows up to nanny a little kid and the kid starts drawing really creepy drawings and you get to see all the drawings throughout the book, and it was such a unique concept and I flew through this book. Then I read my first Frida McFadden book, The Housemaid, which I felt like was a good place to start. Flew through this, really short chapters, super fast paced. I did figure out where it was going, but I didn't mind because her writing was just so easy and bingeable. I have since got hold of a few more because I just know that her books are going to be perfect for a book slump. Oh my gosh, we've already filled up the book cart. Okay, we're gonna swap to the other side. Then I finally picked up some Alex Michaelides. I read 2 in fact. I read Silent Patient and The Maidens. I literally just finished this one. These are both very different vibes. This one is way more classic straight thriller and this one is a bit more dark academia, but both have super short chapters, both are very quick paced. Both of the twists got me. I didn't suspect either one, but I will say this one blew my mind. It did. And looking back on it, I'm like, I should have got it, but I didn't. And that to me is the best kind of twist, where it was always there and there was the chance to get it, but you didn't. I way prefer that to oh my god, how was I ever meant to get that twist? Alex Michaelides knows how to write a good twist. Then I read The Chalk Man by CJ Tudor. This is another one that is maybe more horror, supernatural, but still kind of feels like a thriller. I really enjoyed this. I do remember the ending kind of ended up going somewhere a little bit different from what I was expecting and where I thought the story was setting up to go, but I flew through this. I really liked the writing style. It was very bingeable. Next we have One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This is a YA mystery, pretty simple plot, although I will say the ending is really good. I didn't see it coming. And it kind of follows a Breakfast Club structure of these, I think it's 5 kids in detention. You kind of know one of them is going to have been the one who did it, and you're following each of their lives and what they did before the murder, after the murder, etc. One of my favourite books of the year. I hesitate to put this in thriller because it's so much more than a thriller, but I think it does belong in this genre, and that is Eliza Clark with Penance. This is definitely a literary thriller, if such a thing exists. This is a pretend true crime case written by a pretend author. It's an unreliable narrator following the story of 3 girls who murdered another girl, but it's very literary. It explores every single character, why they did the things they did. It's unlikable characters. It's Eliza Clark brilliance, because say it with me, Eliza Clark does not miss. Then we have a couple of books that I got in blind dates with books. I bought them from Oxfam, so I had no idea what I was getting. The first one I got was a book called Running Scared, and I'll be honest, the plot of this has left my brain. It is not there. She gets wrapped up in something, or like a group of people who are not good, and then years later it's like come back at her. That was the vaguest plot ever. I really don't remember what this was about. I remember it was a pretty quick read, but it didn't necessarily stick with me. And then we have The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman. This is the 3rd book in the Thursday Murder Club. I have read the first one, not the second one, and now the 3rd one. If you've seen the video, you know. I do really wish I'd read these in order. Technically they're standalones, but I do feel like I missed out by not having read the second one. I personally would recommend reading them in order. But nonetheless, it was a fun, cozy mystery, which is not fully my genre. It's not my favourite thing ever, but it is super lovable characters. Richard Osman knows how to write lovable characters. Oh, that does not fit. We'll just pop it down here. Then I think this was the first book I read all year, the second book I read all year. We have The Curfew by T.M. Logan. This is a very classic thriller setup, but there is a little bit of a unique spin. We're following some boys who are meant to have curfews, miss their curfews, and then come back, and then a girl has gone missing, I think. But the kind of spin on it is that you're following from the parents' perspectives, and it's the parents trying to protect the children, but they don't necessarily know what they've done. And I really enjoyed the elements of parents protecting their children even though they don't actually know if their kids have done something or not. Okay, and we're on to our final thriller. I feel like I've been talking about thrillers for so long. We have Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I'm pretty sure this is the only Alice Feeney book I've read so far. I adored this. It was 5 stars. These 2 characters, Adam and Amelia, they go on a little getaway to kind of try and save their marriage. We're not sure that that's really why they're there, because both of them keep talking about how this weekend only one of them's coming home. And it's kind of almost unreliable narrator. You don't quite know who is telling the truth. Everyone's a bit untrustworthy, but you're from both of their perspectives, which is very interesting. I don't remember what the plot twist is in this, but I remember being shook. It was a really good plot twist. I just can't remember it. We are moving on to the final category of books, but she is by far the biggest category of books. It is literary fiction and contemporary fiction combined. It is my favourite genre, as you can probably tell. That's why I've read so many. We have 27 books. Honestly, I thought it was going to be more than that. But it is my favourite genre. I've gotten very good at figuring out the kinds of literary fiction that I enjoy, and it means that I've enjoyed a good majority of the books that I've read. This year I read another 2 Taylor Jenkins Reid books. I read Malibu Rising and Carrie Soto is Back. They're both kind of a part of her very slightly interconnected famous series, if that is a thing. There is a very big Carrie Soto cameo in Malibu Rising, even though this book actually came out quite a long time, I think, before this one. Carrie Soto is about a disgruntled tennis player. Some call her unlikable. I loved her, but she's coming back out of retirement to take her title back. And Malibu Rising is kind of about a family of kids who have a famous dad, and they're all now kind of famous in their own right, and it's following a big party. I really liked both. Taylor Jenkins Reid just doesn't miss for me. I'm excited to continue reading more of hers. I've still got a couple on my backlist, but I think Daisy Jones and the Six is the one I want to get to next. Then we have one that was absolutely featured in my top 10, which was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I go really in depth into all of my top 10. I won't repeat myself too much, but I will just say that this book was absolutely everything to me. She made me fall in love, and then she crushed my little wee heart. And I loved it. Another book that I had never heard of, and I'm so grateful that I took a chance on it and picked it up, and that is The Things We Do to Our Friends by Heather Darwent. This is kind of dark academia. It's about a woman who goes to uni, she's a bit of an outsider, and she gets in with this group of friends, and they start pulling her into things that she's maybe not that comfortable doing, but she also has a very dark backstory of her own. I think if you like Bunny by Mona Awad, this is one for you. Then, as we were just talking about it, Bunny by Mona Awad. Again, it's in my top 10, so I won't go into it too much. This book is an absolute fever dream, but take a chance on it because it is brilliant, if confusing. Then we have a couple of books from one of my favourite videos that I've filmed all year, which was Authors Pick the Books That I Read. I love that video so much. I got to talk to some of my favourite authors, and they picked books for me to read, and literally what more could you want? One of those books was Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. This was so funny, personable, sweet and heartbreaking at the same time. I absolutely flew through it. I think it was just a gorgeous read. And then the other book that I read in that video was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. We're following a girl who gets groomed by her teacher. It's very difficult to read, but it is written with such complexity and raw emotion. It's completely gorgeous, but do check your trigger warnings. On a very similar vein, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Basically everything I said for that, times 2. Check your trigger warnings, it's a very difficult read, but absolutely beautiful. Then I read Elizabeth is Missing by Emma Healy. This is kind of a mystery, but written in a way more literary way. We're following a woman who is losing her memory, but she is also trying to find her friend Elizabeth. She believes Elizabeth to be missing. Everybody else kind of dismisses her as a silly old woman. It's very moving, very well written. Then we have The Mothers by Britt Bennett. I go very in depth in the video where I read this into my thoughts on this. It's very well written, but for lots of reasons, an incredibly difficult read. I would say if you're interested in more thoughts, maybe just go watch that video because I feel like I probably will express them better when I was closer to having read it. If We Were Villains by ML Rio. This book is gorgeous. It was set at drama school and it was very close to my heart as someone who has been to drama school. So much of this plot resonated so deeply with me. Not the murder part, no one was murdered at my drama school, but all of the conversations about all of the rehearsing and the Shakespeare, I loved it. It just felt so deeply personal to me. I don't think you have to have gone to drama school to appreciate this book. I think it's beautifully written anyway, but it definitely gave it an extra edge for me. Another one that I'm amazed I read this year, this feels like a lifetime ago, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is a relatively slow-paced introspective story about a woman who goes to a library on the day that she tries to take her own life and sees all of the different versions of the lives that she could have lived. It's a very simple but unique concept. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I loved everything about this book. The blurb gives you so little, but this book is absolutely packed with emotion, character development. It's a really fast-paced plot. From the blurb, all that you get is that Eleanor is doing an office job that she doesn't really like and she's struggling with the mundanity of every single day. That's all you really get, and it is that, but it's so much more than that. I'm like out of breath. I've been filming for so long. This year, I finally read some Sally Rooney. I read 3 to be exact, and guess what? Every single one was 5 stars. She is a new favourite author. Probably no surprise to anybody because I bang on about her so much, so I'm not going to do it again. I've done nothing but talk about my love for Sally Rooney this year. Then I read a gorgeous little book called Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This follows 2 wives. One goes down in a submarine that ends up submerging and she is down there for way longer than she's meant to be. You get a plot down in the submarine which is almost verging on horror. Very strange, spooky stuff is going on down in the submarine. And then the other timeline is when the woman submerged in the submarine is actually out and she's back with her wife, and you see the aftermath of the situation. It's a very strange book. I loved it. It was beautiful. Very like metaphorical writing. The ending will leave you with more questions than answers, but if you're into that kind of thing, just some absolute stunning writing. Another book I absolutely adored, A Bright Ray of Darkness by Ethan Hawke. Probably in a similar vein to If We Were Villains, this one resonated very deeply with me because it was about acting and Shakespeare, and going through a rehearsal process for a play, a Shakespeare play or any sort of play, is such a unique experience. It's a really cool experience. It's a very difficult experience to explain fully, and I think Ethan Hawke does an incredible job, and that's probably because he's an actor in real life. This book follows a famous actor who has been caught in a cheating scandal. He is dealing with the fallout of that scandal while putting on a production of, I want to say Macbeth, or one of the other ones. I can't remember. It's gorgeous. It's a very short book. It's only just over 200 pages. But it is phenomenally written. I love this book. Then we have The Virgin Suicides. I definitely struggled with the writing of this book. It is very slow-paced and simple, but very complicated at the same time. I'm very glad that I read it because it is considered a modern classic, and I think the concept is great, but the writing style did take me a very long time to get my head around. Then we have A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This follows a young boy who is having nightmares and his mother is currently in hospital, and a magical tree visits him and is telling him stories. I won't tell you any more than that, but it is one of the most emotional books I've read all year. I think this story is beautiful, but do check your trigger warnings. Next up, we have On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This author is actually a poet, and this book reads like poetry. This entire book is a letter from a son to his mother, and the whole letter is talking about the Vietnam War and the kind of lasting generational impact. It's incredibly beautifully written. You definitely have to focus. It's not an easy read. I did listen primarily to the audiobook. There were several parts that I had to rewind to make sure I was actually listening, but every single word in this book is so carefully chosen. This book is objectively well written. And then we have my favourite book of the year. Spoilers if you've not seen last week's video. My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Atessa Moshfegh. Again, I go into such full detail in that video, so I won't bore you again, but I love everything about this book. This next book, I really didn't know what category to put it in. I went in the end with just kind of straight fiction because I was a little unsure. If you have an opinion on it, feel free to let me know. But this is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. This book has a very unique writing style. It's a great book for a book slump because it's written in almost vignettes. The writing is very short and snappy, which I really liked. Following this very rich family living on an island, and there is a summer where the main girl basically can't remember it and she's kind of trying to figure out what happened. So it's almost a mystery. There's kind of a subplot of sort of romance, but not really. It's more just like talking about a relationship. It's YA, so I didn't really know where to put it. I read this very, very quickly, and I do think it's a great book for a book slump. All right, we have 4 books left. Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. It's very literary, beautiful writing about this cafe where you can time travel, except that there are a lot of very specific rules to do with the time travel. So you have to stay in the same place. You can only be there for about 5 minutes. You have to have already been to the cafe. It's a lot of rules. It's very specific time travel. This one's very short. She's under 200 pages and it's basically 4 interconnected stories. Then we have The One Memory of Flora Banks by Emily Barr. I picked this up in, I want to say, a 24-hour readathon, thinking it was a romance. Yeah, it's not. It's a YA, I guess, mystery, contemporary fiction. We're following a girl called Flora who has no long-term memory. She basically forgets everything in her life, so she's continually having to write notes for herself. And then the back of the book says she then kisses a boy and it's the first thing she remembers. And I think that line made me think it was a romance. It is not. Cannot express that enough. It is not a romance. The writing style, kind of due to the age of the character and the circumstances, is very young, and it becomes very repetitive because you're constantly having to re-remember things with the character. So the writing style definitely reflects the kind of mental space of the character. So it does mean it's very young and very repetitive, but it is a super unique concept. Then penultimately, we have Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. Oh my goodness, this was incredible. This is a literary fiction, although it reads like a thriller. We're following a white author who is not doing well, and then her friend is an Asian author and she is very, very successful, and then the Asian author dies and the white author steals her manuscript and passes it off as her own, and the rest of the plot is a car crash. But it's a car crash you don't want to look away from. I loved this. It was 5 stars for me. This book was incredibly quick paced, moved so fast, but at the same time had very important discussions. And then finally, oh my god, I've been talking for so long, we have Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. This was actually a bad one to end on because this is also in my top 10 books, so again, I've already gone very in depth into it, but this was the classic thing that I loved, and the thing that I really realised this year is my favourite genre. It's not really a genre, but it's a genre I've invented, which is messy people in their 20s, unlikable characters, problematic people, messy relationships, whatever that is as a genre, that is what I like. And that is what this book is. And this year, more than any year, I very much established my reading taste. And this is my reading taste. It's not going to be for everybody, but I loved this book. This is every single book that I have read this year, plus more because there were a few that I didn't own physically. Wait, I forgot one. Wait, I forgot 3. We have 3 more books. I've written them down. Oh no. I'm going to speed run them so quickly because we both thought I was done. I'm so sorry, I'm not done. Okay, 3 more that I don't own physically. Luster by Raven Leilani. I read this book the week that I got my puppy. I was very sleep deprived. I don't remember the plot. I didn't know what was going on that week. I need to reread it. I did like the writing style, but I did not know what was going on. The Guest by Emma Cline, also in my top 10, so I don't need to go into that. It's in that video. And then Good Materials by Dolly Alderton. My first book by Dolly Alderton. Super comforting writing about being in your 30s. It was just very relatable, comforting. I really, really liked it. Now I'm done. Oh my goodness. This might be the most filming I've ever done. I'm gonna edit it down significantly, I hope, because I think I have over an hour of footage. Oh, I have well over an hour of footage. I have been talking for so long. If you are still here, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, comment the little butterfly emoji. So it's like a secret code. I know who stayed till the end. But, oh my god, I didn't give you my grand total. I read 82 books this year, which is more books than I have ever read. I do suspect that I will end up reading more next year. By the end of this year, I was reading a lot more than I was at the start of this year, if that makes sense. Like by a month, I read a lot more towards the end of this year. So I do suspect there's a chance we will beat 82 next year, but it doesn't matter. It's not a competition. I enjoyed my reading. I really established my reading taste this year, which I'm really happy with. I read some incredible books and I had fun filming it all for you guys. So thank you for being here. It genuinely means a lot to me. Subscribe so you can see all the books I read next year. And let me know down below which of these you've read, which you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. Let's chat about them. Thank you very much for watching. Like the video, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I'll catch you in the next one. I love you. Goodbye!